Dang the Kizzy and Ma the Gawa Dang, Dipa Karachevineda, Dipa Chewa, Dang Gawa Chewa, and Dipa Chua, and then Dipa Chewa said the Kizzy, Jiangi Court in Ma, or do sing the Shiver.
Good evening. So last week we looked at or having concluded looking at the 10 non-virtues, we looked then at the heaviness of both virtue and non-virtue, or the weightiness of virtue and non-virtue.
That Dipa Chechon top Chechon Delia, and the Chiki, and Chavashana Delia, top Chechon, condition was in there, Delia, in the Shingu Kone top Chawas. And the thing you can top chawas, Mobile top chawas, Sambio top chawas, said it. That is an Kawadilla, Kawainada, and Divainada, and the thing you can top chawa chiche, and the thing you can top chawa, Mobile top chawa, Sambio top chawas, said, all those in like what do you mason do, top chet had she when the Sundua.
And then tonight we come to a second presentation on the heaviness of virtue or non-virtue. And so near the bottom of page 131, an auxiliary presentation of ways in which karma is strong. So this applies to both virtuous and non-virtuous, and has 4 points: great strength by way of the field or the recipient, and great strength by way of the support, that's the basis of vows in the person engaging, and the great strength by way of the thing or the substance, and then fourthly, the great strength by way of the attitude or motivation.
Teletene, Yugi Chane, not of Chechungure, said the Xing said this or tongue, the Tipasasaki Yuda, Gavasasa Yu Teletine Savana, and the Udi Cavagitone, and the Tipatop, Natipatop Chichon and Gavatop Chichin Cavayore said, Xing would not of Chava said this Sumaro.
The first of the 4, great strength by way of the field. So field can also be called here object, and that is the object towards one, towards whom one engages in either virtuous or non-virtuous activity. So this is the field or the object or the recipient.
I do one my younger day in a Tangzubine Xing Masona that Gavasa say you and the Janjusemba Chimbena, Janjusembatilla, and the Chebab Gavasawana. Gavat of Chewa. The changes of my imbadang, Susuki Bujina, Deniki, Gila, and the Jimatavana, Jimatavana, di Jimatawiki, Gawati, Janjusemba Chobu, Gawanidi, that Janjusemba Chobu, Gawati, Gawashu Chewa, this Karsene, you Puse, you, and the Janjusemba, and then Top Chewa in the Digito, the Yuichane, Xing said this or Dinashin, Divara Chevina, Janjusemba Delia, and the Jitus, Tsitu. Shuvada, Shebi Divada, then it Jason Shang and the Sosuki Bujilia, and Tisu Shevana, Dini Divade and Sulchirisina, Tisu Sheva Jibari, and Jason Batella Tisu Mashuvana, and the Divachava, such the Shin when it Divachava, Gavachewa, and this one Tsungorwa.
The great strength by way of the field, so there's various sub-outlines. We'll come to the one later on bodhisattvas, but just to use that as an illustration now. So if one directs an activity towards a bodhisattva or an ordinary being, where the object or the recipient of one's activity is either a bodhisattva or ordinary being, and we say that the person engaging in the activity and their motivation and what they are doing is identical, but to whom the activity is being done, or the recipient of the activity, the object, that is only where the difference lies. If one, for example, gives a gift, makes an offering to a bodhisattva, one will create far more merit than if one gives the identical offering, the same person gives the same offering with the same quality of motivation to an ordinary being. Likewise, in the context of non-virtue, if one speaks harshly to a bodhisattva and harshly to an ordinary being, where all factors are the same except for the recipient, then one creates far more non-virtue, when speaking harshly to a bodhisattva than an ordinary being.
That you can that you can say to that so rangi, the Gawachi, the Gansa, the Divichi and Gansa, so sweet ditone, Divichi, and then you can say this all. Then you can say, oh. Then you can say, Divichi and the Gawajuan Gansa Churwa, Gansa, then so sweet when that and the character Divichi and Gawachi Yungurella, Bena, Janju Semba, Janju Yamle, the name and Sotargi Domba. Domba Nyamsule, Domba Sun du King Gansachi Dang, Domba Masun can get that, Manzuke, me, Society with Chimbana, Dini di Kewadi, Pena, Shanchi, Chimbatamaina, Chezada, Conjola Chopina, Chezadi Chope, the Niga Chobo Chobo, Zeda, Jibor Pubina, and Pusa Chipache, Puya Zipaina, Dien Jiki, and Domba Sun Chane, and Tsungu, but Chezadi Digi. Domnendiki Chopedi, Gawachi Sagores. And the Divacheva inaya, Domnendiki Divacheva, the Divachavade, and the Domnemaimba, Kimbadi, Divachevadi, Divachua Sagores, another Domnendiki, Gawachevana, Gawacheva, Kimbadile, then the Divachevana, Divachavares, eh? Or those in the thing you can say this word.
So the first of these four, the great strength by way of the field. So this term field, understand it to mean as the object towards whom the activity is done or the recipient of the activity. The second, great strength by way of the support. So this refers to the person engaging in the activity. So the first was the recipient, and here is the actor, the person engaging in the activity. And what support refers to is their continuum, whether it is a support for vows or not, the basis or the support of vows. So that's what the support refers to. So the person who is engaging in the activity, whether they have vows on their continuum or not, has a great impact in terms of the strength of the result that will follow. So in the previous segment, we had mentioned the difference was in terms of the recipient, the field. Here, it's about whether vows abide on the continuum or not. So if one is practicing generosity and one has vows, one will accrue far more merit than that same act of generosity towards the same recipient, the same object being offered, but the person making the offering does not have vows on their continuum. Both will accumulate virtue, but the amount is greatly different. So too with non-virtue. So in the previous segment, I gave the illustration of harsh speech. So if someone engages in harsh speech who has vows on their continuum, they will create more non-virtue than someone who engages in the same harsh speech to the same recipient, but without vows on their continuum, they'll create less non-virtue.
Puse yu dang pugen gasa ni member che puye ge je di se ko da je di to ne je diva chawa da ge wa chin ge wa chawa yung re sa de to chawa be na ju ge chou puye ge na ne chou puye na ne san sing gi be ne ji se la lo so puye da puye ge chou puye da puse di da Lama san su li ne puse ji ba je puye ge da je de da 제대 puyo sonam le ane sosugu ane chigi drubi chebaru chebayna drubi chebadi ane chebadi ane chebayna di ane sonam chebari esaji da ze yugone ngobigone ngobigone da chechonsege disungurwa.
And the third great strength by way of the thing. So thing here it refers to the substance offered. So it can also be referred to as the object offered. Whereas the first field, strength by way of the field, this can also be called object, but that's object in terms of the recipient. Here the third, the thing, refers to the object that is, for example, offered, the substance. So if one takes an act of generosity and all the characteristics are the same in terms of the recipient of the act of generosity and the motivation and the person doing the act, but what differs is the thing or the object being offered. If it's an act of material generosity, a certain amount of virtue will be created. But if it's an offering of practice, far more virtue will be created. So here, again, in this illustration, all that differs is the thing or the substance offered.
Na sambi kunye topchewa se de kunlong sambi ke kyabra de kunlong janju simgi simbi kone ane jige shenlia jimba tangala soba cheba na ane di kewa chewa che andi na shin ane di memba ane kunye kunlong simbi to ne ane jimba tangwa ne jimba di da kewa chungwa chagirwa di na shin da nyo kewa mi kewa chebe na ya dikwa chebe na ya kunlong nyomo duksum shukchembu denigi to ne an jeba na dikwa de chukshi chewa denegi nyomo duksum me chik shukchembu mene maybe to ne cheba na de dikwa chebe dikwa chungwa chagirwa chida da samba kunlong ge to le kunlong shukche chung ge to ne an dikwa de shukche chung gore ese.
The fourth of the four points is the great strength by way of the attitude. So attitude here refers to the motivation. So again, taking an illustration of generosity, but generosity, whilst often utilized in this presentation, this presentation doesn't only refer to generosity, but to all virtuous, non-virtuous acts. So if one is engaging in generosity with a motivation of bodhicitta, incredible virtue will follow. But if one is engaging in that same act of generosity, but one is not motivated by bodhicitta, still a virtuous mind, but not one like bodhicitta, virtue will follow, but not nearly to the same extent. And then similarly, in terms of non-virtue, so non-virtue will necessarily have an afflicted motivation, and depending on the strength of that affliction, the resulting non-virtue will be great or less.
That this word that Shingu Kone and Gewachina Gewa Topchawada, then and Dibachina Diba Chechunga Kabadi, or the Suya Delia, that Delia Shing said that Cheva in the Chopus Yuda, Gewasas Yu, Dibani Dibasas Yu disorder. That Yu de la Dambo and the Garson Yu Gonjosum, and that's Gonjosum, and then rang Lamadang. Then Lamadan Drawa dang, Sudo, Lamadan Drawada, Pama So de Didani, Samba Shuk, Drapo Majing, Penny Chungoni, Chungoji Jejang, and Sunam da Kanamatova Chivi Chiros.
So that's a brief summation of these 4 points. Now to come to a detailed presentation on each of them. Great strength by way of the field. And again, field here, take it to mean the recipient of the action. And with all of these, all 4, it relates to both virtue and non-virtue. So reading from the text. In the case of the 3 jewels, gurus, those who are like gurus, one's parents and so forth, even if one's attitude towards them lacks intensity and the benefit or harm one does to them is small, any merit or misdeed will be great.
Kalari, George, Kalari, Jimbatana, Dijimbatana, Jimbari, Conjuli Pia, the Jing Jabena, Conjusum Pia Dida, Gawadi, Gawashuk Chavari, as a Conjusum dance, said, that puts you conjusum the chapel, you conjusum the Sumurvada.
So if one makes offerings to the 3 jewels, or one makes offerings to those, to ordinary people who are in need, perhaps hungry, and offering them food, because of the power of the field or the recipient, greater virtue will be created by making offerings to the 3 jewels.
Lama dang said that Rangi Lamalia Chopuada, Rangi Lamale, Shen, Jilia Chopu, Jimbatawa Chibana, Rangi Lamala Pua Chopuadi, that Chobadi and Gawachavari said.
And the second is that of gurus. So if one makes engages in acts of virtue, such as generosity, but any acts of virtue towards one's Lama, then the merit created is extensive.
Lama dan drawa sidi da rangi Lama mai na na shengi Lama la so pa yorwa da tenigi mi yende rangi Lama na shin yende chenpo shen liya ane chi do sine ane chi tala tarbe lam tenshi nyamlen pa na de gen ki tenigi Lama dan drawa liya ane chi chu pu ba ina ane shen chu pu wa le di yang chi ke wa che wa re sa chi sungdo.
Those who are like lamas, so this we should understand as being someone with whom you do not have a teacher-student relationship with, but who nevertheless is a teacher, is a guru. So someone who is a guru, just not your guru, and you offer them service, make material offerings, and so forth towards them, one accrues great merit.
나 랑게 파마다 파마 많이 발에 챤데 챤베네 나 랑게 파마리아 아니 두치네 반도 주바디 네 개와디 쳐와리 해서지.
And so too with one's parents, because by making the merit that one creates in relation to them, or the non-virtue, is also greatly enhanced because of being the field of the parents.
나 딘마 속라빈도 속나라 디응루와 베네 지게 주변냠네 제대다 람라 파베 강사 마토나 솔람나 절란라 소바 냠네 제대는 실라 람라 슈긴 되는 솔람 절람바들레 개와 주 건줄 최고 피해당 다 람라 마슈긴게 강사실 최고 후에지나 다 람라 슈비게서 디나레 최고 후에데 소름 체기리 해서지 다 속나래야 되는 거. 제가 딜라로 람 솔람발에 최고 부여다 람 마두칸을 최고 부여니 솔람바다 졸람발에 람두칸 디기를 최고 부여야 돼. 다서는 체기래서 중고로.
And so forth. So others, apart from those explicitly mentioned, who will still be considered part of a field of benefit or of merit, will be those who have attained the ordinary paths, the paths of accumulation or preparation. So they're not accounted amongst the three jewels, they're not Arya beings, but who have nevertheless attained a path. As well as those who have not yet attained a path, but are genuine practitioners, genuinely striving for a path.
디다라 삼바 슈잡고 매진 데니게 초푸에기 데네 초푸에 콘솔리아데 콘조숨다랑 라마단 드라와단 랑게 파마단 안데 데니게 람냠낸 지겐 두번냠낸 지시 제데솔리아 초푸에나 소수게 푸에게 삼바 빼마세 삼바 슈 첨보라 매바이네 삼바 슈 충중마도 매바이네 안데니게 초푸에나 슈잡고 매진 안데 판녀 총우식 시인자스 델리아 푸에로스다 데 충중으로 매바이네 로자 춘주지 마도 매바이네 아니 디바치 개와치 모사고래지래 다데 개와치 모사기래서 충원식 직계 직제냐 춘주원지 부바이나야 아니 소남 모사기래서
Even if one's attitude towards them lacks intensity. So here this points out that even if one's attitude is weak, one is perhaps just engaging in the activity without a particularly strong motivation, because of the power of the field, one will accrue great virtue or non-virtue.
어나 데니게 데소 건조숨다 라마다 랑게 라마다 자와다 파마로 소바 데솔리아야 지네바로 치 군노 수치모 매바네야 데니게 수촌준 마도 매네 네바 총총 제베네 안디바치 모사고래시래
And furthermore, and concludes, and the benefit or harm one does to them is small, any merit or misdeed will nevertheless be great. So here, even if the offering or the service or whatever it may be one is doing towards one's parents, one's teachers, or the teachers of others, the three jewels and so forth, even if what one is doing is generally considered minor or slight or insignificant, the result will be great, either greatly virtuous or greatly non-virtuous.
then Denegi, the Dobchimbo said, the Yugi Channel to Shagri. Nada conjo sumla de nada sanyo conjo dan sho conjo gedung gojo sum nala tuide gedung gojo nala pabe gaza chasan yorwa da chesa di sungura da dinegi gewa chine gewa chewa da diba chine diba chunga diba chewa imbi yonggu bi gyumsen garre labna beneda conjo sum mayimba lam lama shuge shen simje chile neba cheba le conjo sumlia neba chunjo jes nan cheba ine andi diba chimbo sagire larwa andi diba chimbo and Gawaruch Masona, Bene Sim Prieg, Sim Shu Chimbumena, some of the Chunjun China, and the Prieg Zedi, and Chunju Puena, and the Shalia, and Puale, Javale, and the Gavashu Chigi Chagi Larua, Sunroda, the Gavashu Chewa Yong and a Dibashu Chewa Yongo by the Caressana, you kept no conjo somebody, and then Chevada, Shalia, Pando Chewa Inza, Pando Chimbu, Shan Semja Tamjelia, and Dunga said, and dig you to Yagi. Dele conscious Laba Mevarwa, she's a conscious the Pandoshin to Chewa in the D channel, and Diba Chevana, Diba Chewa, Gawa Chevana, Gawa Chewa did good did Yunden Chewa, and the Shalia, Pando Chewa, and in the Dishan Chagaroda.
So the three jewels, which incorporate the Buddha jewel, the Dharma jewel, and the Sangha jewel, so the collection of Arya beings. So any acts towards them will lead to a greatly powerful karma being created. So too with one's lamas and those who are teachers to others, spiritual teachers to others, as well as one's parents. And so if one engages with them with a weak or intense motivation, or with an act that is slight or significant, a great result will always follow. And the reason is because of the quality of the field or the recipient. And the quality of the recipient here refers to the incredible qualities in their continuum and or the benefit that they bring. So it's because of the benefit that they bring into your life and or the incredible qualities on their continuum that one's acts towards them lead to such a powerful karmic result.
Nen pamala seveneda pamala rangi pamalia chike gewatubala sarang pamalia desi sembat never chunju chevena diba chevasa and gewacha sadi and rangi pamale shembi gansa chili chevale pamal chevadi niki Gewachevana, Gewachewa, Tibetan Chavaris, Imbi Dian, Cetela, Samdana, Suso Rangla, Pando getting Chishodi, Rangi Pama, the Cetela Rala getting Chishodila, Rangi Pama is that Chen, Mishanda, the Gena, Ran, Didang, the Pama into one, Pama de Ralia, Cetelia, Shindo, getting Chimburwada, getting Chisho and the D in Zada, Pamalia, the Niki, or Jay, the Tiniro, Gawachik. Rochebaina, Gawacha Sayada, and it is Pamalia and the Maribarush Chevene, never Chunju Chevena, Tibacha Sawadi, Cousin Cedella Ranglia, getting Chisho Pamarwa, there's a deed that it is.
And to explain a little bit then the field of benefit, the parents. So the reason why one's parents are included here, and this refers to one's own parents, because whilst many people in society will be parents, they will not be one's own parents, or they will have been one's parents in lives previous to this. But here it specifically refers to one's own parents in this life. And the reason why they are such a powerful field is because of the incredible benefits they've brought into one's life. They would have shown one a lot of kindness, but no matter what attitude they expressed towards you, they brought you great benefit. You have life independence on the care they gave to you when you were most vulnerable. So because of the largely incomparable benefit we've received from our parents in this life, they are such a powerful field, which means slight virtue or non-virtue to act directed towards them leads to a greatly powerful result.
Jida rangi pama da shen simjen de geral ya gedin chwa surya labna jinada rangi pamada shen simja tamji rangla gedin chenpa imba dhin jikparwa dinga ngi pamadi gedin chewari shandadi yangala gedin chewa marila ayo marwa kazande ngzugi de simja tamji rangla ya dhin chenpa imba jikparwa ina tsedi wangdu jeba ina tsedi wangdu jeba na soso pamadi tsedi la soso la gedin sheshori 마도 셴 안베는 가지고 야선하는 여행에 보신다 되니까 맞은 저 기념 메팅 심전되게 세디 원도지는 소소리아 게딩 가요 말때 뭐야 신고 말와 저와 가이메로 지당 셔바나 개왕아마다 치마 심다베나 개왕아마 심다베다 되게 전부 니마 그리제로 지다 다들 가지고 가서는 파말이야 두셰바네 개와네 개와 채와 세그레세디 세디 원도 제바 소소한리야 세델라 그진 체쇼데랑에 파말이 와서 디인자다 김전디 차네스 숨고래.
It's good to be clear here on this presentation about parents. In this context, it's specifically about the parents in this life, because they have brought such benefit to you in this life. As you'll know from other presentations, we develop the awareness, or the recognition that we have a relationship of parent and child with each and every single sentient being. And therefore, there is no basis for discrimination between them or differentiating between them in terms of the kindness they have shown us. There's only really a difference in terms of length of time, or perhaps body or physical form at the time. But other than that, there is no difference in terms of kindness shown between any being. However, here it is specific to the parents of this life, because in this life, they are the ones who have shown us such great kindness. And whilst others, and we can point to perhaps many in the animal world, fish in the ocean, we really haven't developed any relationship with them in this life. In a distant past life, absolutely. They've shown us kindness comparable to our parents of this life. But here, as a practitioner, this refers specifically to one's parents of this life.
Majimba Lamba Les Lar Puna Sangedan Chugi ni Dajing and Engaging Soa Manyong Bardu Midalas. And Deang Shadu Dubi Goina Nyawa Chimbodang and Sheina Narmegi and Kor Nyehors or Nyehorvi Nyawasur. Then
Lama Tsongkhapa quotes from the Application of Mindfulness Sutra. The karma of stealing even a little thing from the three jewels is purified if it is returned in the case of the Buddha and the Dharma. However, in the case of the Sangha, it is not purified as long as the result is not experienced. If it is a requisite means of providing sustenance for the Sangha, one will be born in the great hells. And if something else, then one will be born in the great darkness surrounding Avicii. So we see here in the first line, the Buddha taught that stealing, the karma of stealing something even of little value, something minor, from the three jewels.
양결이야 건조리야 산조 건조다 최 건조리야 제디 푸와이나 네 디바다고래 이제 배는 저기 내내게 산조 건조다 최 건조스 당 저기 배네 당 저 구수 최대다 아니 구대 구다 내내게 최 건조다 자기로 내가 그래 제가 내내게 구 确公就塞定确公就空了，不要了确公就塞，其他确公就塞定这个南路的告诉南边的高点是个多，其实高点的南边的不塞的，但确公就了不要确保的开始下我塞的，按照固定的确固里啊不要，你确定里啊不要，这个确公就了不要这下个多。确定的个是呢，我土点拆过了哇。其实确公去了，配合这个是南了，我不配合是干嘛的？南面的多高点的，其他确公去了的高点南的来说，高点了南的了，你新多配合要嘛了，那高点南的新多配合的，那个是干要嘛了。当然是配合的确公就配合的，因为古典松点来配合的，确个说的，松当，那的确定了说配合个在。上节我所写学不应该让就配合在的明白呢？那上节过了也配合在的个上节了配合在效果的，其实的古嘛家哪时候？实际上，这当然上节过了，上节了配合在，现在的工作说明哪呢？当然就上节过了面呢固定的了配合的，那上节了配合在，上节了配合在效果。俺确定呢，去送了也配合在的个，那确了配合个在效果了。松现在确被波的底下就是松罗的，松罗呢，这上有松山的了，古松土松山的，古松土松山，古山呢上有古的些，松山的松整个松的嘛松小是吧？松的的那个别的的个松小是吧？其他土山的确定的，这土给春节的确定的，但确定的土给春节前，但的别的这个上节给的。确有个说的送给村的送给了，送给那的送村的是吧？但上节工作的上节归村的是吧？其实当然就上节雇送到了确配是当然这个上节我是结构嘛，上节工其实但上节也工作了也上节也都些下节上节了工作了确配的，上节了确配下个是吧？但上节也送给都些下节还是确保的，带了确配的上节送了不确下个是确保下个是吧？第二就确定了呀，那但上节也土也那春天土也都现在上面的土了配没有确定了配完呢，土了配再加了，其他都关键送了配再些这些我的。
As Lama Tsongkhapa mentioned just previously, the virtue or non-virtue created in relation to the three jewels is immense. So therefore, if one steals from the three jewels, even if it is a little thing, great non-virtue will be accumulated. So Lama Tsongkhapa, the Buddha, will talk about purifying this in a moment. But just to explain what is being referred to, because if we think of the three jewels, we think of the Buddha, we think of the realizations on the minds of Buddhas and Arya beings as the Dharma jewel, and then Arya beings as the Sangha jewel. So what is it that one would be stealing from them? So in the context of our lived experience, one would think of stealing offerings that have been made to the representations for the three jewels. So we could think of a stupa. When offerings are made to a stupa represents the enlightened mind, the omniscient mind of Buddhas. And if one then were to steal offerings from that were made to a stupa, it's like stealing from the Buddha jewel. Likewise, if we think of offerings that are made perhaps to texts that are displayed, or even offerings of texts, because a text can be a substance offered, or it can be a representation of the Dharma jewel, because it is a basis upon which the knowledge within is the basis upon which the Dharma jewel is created. Therefore, offerings may well be made to physical texts, and stealing from that would be like stealing from the Dharma jewel. So this is how in the world without Buddha Shakyamuni, one would steal from the Buddha jewel as well as stealing from the Dharma jewel.
Langbale, Larpuna, sort of 양 대신 아주 제지다 근데 산지 구리야 지금 부셔 요딩 아주 구마자바나 가르나 신도로시나 지금 고로 자타마로 부셔기 된 구마자바나 다이 구마자 디바침보다 다 기디다서 다 gö샤체제 양장 아주 그 디마선 비 되니게 야야야 부이나 아니 디바다 고래제래 나디로 와도 구마자타마 구마자는 양자 제마 구마자타마 부 안데 내가 빈 최대다 그 송상지 송다 되니게 안에 상유 군달 되니게 표시해 되는 구마전에 되네야 루시네 야자 푸베나 야자 파 푸베나 안에 디바다로 그래서 송도.
The Buddha goes on to say, is purified if it is returned in the case of the Buddha and the Dharma. So if one steals offerings and perhaps just some fruit or a small amount of money, so as we've heard, whilst these things on their material value is very low, the negative karma is immense. So recognizing this, wanting to purify, then by offering something of a similar value again to the Buddha jewel or the Dharma jewel, one can purify that non-virtue. What's mentioned here is very brief, but one would also have other mental factors involved, such as regret for having stolen from the three jewels. So that and other virtuous factors would be required for it to purify sufficiently.
안다 겐dü인 세디 다 겐dü 다 대체 건초다 게 산유 건초듯이 다 겐dü인 건초 수면은 겐dü인 건초세 겐dü인 건초스 겐dü인 세 다 겐dü인스 다디나데 겐dü인스 올 겐dü라 겐dü람나 안주기 겐론 파이나다 겐론 마이나데 시연체려야 시네 안가도 빠지 여베나 디센딜이야 겐dü인스 올 겐dü인 직서 미시 겐론마 시연나 겐dü인 직차고라 겐론 시연나 겐dü인 직차고라 되네 신의 야가자 마와연나 아니 디 초보딜이야 겐dü인라 월데 겐dü인스 데 겐dü인 건초다 겐dü인이 돼서 가요.
The sub-outlines aren't included in the English, but up to that full stop, after the word Dharma, is one sub-outline, and that is presenting the field of the three jewels. Now we come to the field of a different sub-outline, and so here where we see Sangha, it's not referring necessarily to the Sangha jewel, but to Sangha in general. And so Sangha in general refers to a group of at least 4 fully ordained nuns or monks, so 4 or more. This would create a Sangha or a community.
파베 가사 지인고 숨니 숨시 지가제나 파베게 파베 통람규를 계획한 가사 수인에 되는 현재다 내게된 건전한 차고라 나아주 소소기 뭐 람규를 맞게 봐이나라 솔라나 줄라이나라 되는게 언지게 네 돈바 네 결혼에 결혼도 돈바 유예되겠는데 시차바에 소소기 뭐 람규를 맞게 봤는데 시들라 게는 건조스 괜찮으시오라 겐준세 얼마도 겐준 건조라고 하면 겐준 건조라나 파베 가사인 거래. 지자다 전주심바 년뒤 파베 가사 년뒤 통람바 간 토도가 가사 지겨러다 니 파겐준 건조래 나 겐준 리베레 말했으나 야델이야 겐준세데 초보 시연세 돈받는 거 고인다. 겐준 말에서 손쇼로와 The
difference then between a Sangha, let's say a Sangha community, so this would be a lowercase s, and the uppercase s, the Sangha jewel, is that the Sangha jewel can refer to any number of beings, even one. But this person necessarily has realized emptiness directly, and therefore is an Arya being. So a single person who has realized emptiness directly constitutes the Sangha jewel, or can be referred to as the Sangha jewel. Whereas for monks or nuns to be considered a Sangha community requires at least a collection of 4 fully ordained monks or nuns. And so a collection of 4. Then they would be the lowercase Sangha community. But if a single a monk or nun has realized emptiness directly, whilst that single being would be an illustration of the Sangha jewel, they would not be an illustration of the Sangha community unless they got together with 3 other fully ordained nuns or monks.
On the Negi, this would Suna Chigle, this Sundua, Tamen Beke, Wando Chebaina, Nak the Negi, Gelon, she sounded by Nakinudes. The net Pape Kansa Chigina, Chigina, the Pajik, Kindu check Mares, Cook, Pape Kansa Chidi Shimena, Chimadishi, Kindu check Mares, Kindin Lago Mares, the Kidun Goncho, the Kidun Mares. On Dinashi, that Tapa Chimpic, and that Tapa Chimbola. Geshe Simba Pape Kansa Chigina Pachi Kindu Res, Kidun Goncho Are, Kindu Ares, Jenegi, Sunachi, Yusare. Tapa Chimpic Pape Kansa Chigine, Disu Kindun Goncho Are, Kindu Are, said. In me Kindu de la Kindu Shi in Gugu or Mare said. Tangazuki Chidang, Manzuki Tamin, Big, the duel, Trotan Shisha Sheba in the Kindu City, Ninzo, Tomba Yuki Shikure. Pape Kansa Chilla, Gasore, Gendula Gomarda. The Gendula do you draw Chena, in Jimmy, Pape Kansa and Yanzo Domba de Megi, Shiuna, Pape Kansa, and then Genu Gonchore, Genduare. That she may not cheat the Ima de Mena, Genu Gonchore, the Genu Mari, do you draw Chena, did
So, in relation to this point, what I've just presented, you could say you can generally take it as a general presentation. Throughout the vast expanse of the Buddhist teachings, you will come across a different explanation of the Sangha jewel and the Sangha. So in the Theravadan tradition, based on the Vinaya, there it will state that that 4 monks are required for the Sangha community, and also for the Sangha jewel. A single a monk, even if they are an Arya being, will not constitute this Sangha jewel. It needs to be a collection of 4. And then, so that's in terms of the Theravadan tradition. Then in terms of if we were to talk specifically from the Mahayana perspective, they would certainly agree that the Sangha community needs to be a collection of at least 4 fully ordained monks or nuns, but in terms of the Sangha jewel, that can be a single Arya Bodhisattva, and now this is different to earlier, and that single Arya Bodhisattva can be called an illustration not only of a Sangha jewel, but also a Sangha community.
Danyanzogi, Tomba Yugan, she and Chekure, Papa in Mazamitigo, Papa in there, and Shimena, the Guinan Chago, Maria, Tadonadi, this one Shantigor, that's all.
So, again, just to repeat the one point from the Vinaya perspective, so as probably practiced in the Theravadan tradition, the Sangha, and I, as translator, I'm adding the word community to show lowercase s. So Sangha community requires 4 fully ordained monks. Whether any of them are Aryas or not, it doesn't make a difference. 4 are required. Yeah. And then I was just checking. So from the Vinaya perspective, it's referring to 4 fully ordained monks or nuns. So 4 fully ordained monks or nuns, whether any are Aryas or not, doesn't matter, but it needs to be a group of 4 fully ordained monks or nuns for it to be considered a Sangha community.
On that day, Gendu said that Gendu Shi, so Gelon Shidan, Gelon by Shidan, and Sopa Sura, Sopa Yenche, Gendu said the Gogor that day. Just like Gendu, that Genduns and Gendu Puja because H. Kumajabana, Yanja Gendulia, Puvena, Tibotagreves and Didagmares or that. Sanjo Conchola, Cho Conchola, Puvi, Kumajabana, Yanja said, Puvana, Tibadi, 다루고레스 겐둥기 겐둘레 푸지베 제지 구마 잡체 안바 겐둘레 야자체 푸베네 디바다그레스미 디다고다고 말해서 겐둥기 데 초와 겐둥기니 초와라 초와 만용바도 미다라 세데 다 겐둘레 푸제 겐둥기 푸바점이 디바다고 말해서 제산다 겐둘레 디니 푸 디바디 안 소소 마음바나 디바디 둥하리 뇨나마다 다고 말해서 겐둥기 초와 게den기니 소와 만용 바도 미달라. 그래서 게den기 제지 구바나 니게 대부디 제마 소소그 동하지 용고고레스 뇨네 다루고레 동하 만용나 다기 말에 푸 야제 제디야 입겐들 푸베나 디바다기 말에서 그래.
Just before I come to again, that's it. So where we're going to start reading from now, however, so it seems here the word Sangha should be the lowercase s, the Sangha community, as opposed to Sangha jewel. So now to come to again as just covered. However, in the case of the Sangha, it is not purified as long as the result is not experienced. So this then contrasts with the previous sentence, and you can see how the translator made this error. That the previous sentence referred to the Buddha jewel and the Dharma jewel, and there the non-virtue can be purified by offering a substance of similar value, whereas in terms of the Sangha community, merely re-offering as something that has been stolen will not purify that unripened karma. It cannot be purified, it has to be experienced, and that then is the meaning of is not purified as long as a result is not experienced.
대양의 셰도 뒤에 고이나 냐와 침보당스. 다시 셰이나 아니 날메기 코르세다 냐호나 녀위기 녀호위기 아니 냐와레바 침벌기와 유레에서 셰도 뒤에 고세디 nengendungi 최게 샤라게 칼라르 둘로 멤버 단 라바도 네 겐들레 푸야레 둘로 푸야다 사야도에 푸야르 용로와 지난데니게 샤도 두에 고세도 샤라 최게 샤라 릭스우르 언데니게 푸야게 제디 아주 구마자베나 니게 제보데 가와지가선 냐와 침번을 기르에스 냐와 침번 냐와 다 냐와 천야 다 장에 디술바 기용을 해서 냐와 침보다 냐와 침벌 기르에스 셴이나 시르다 셴 단진 긴두기 베제 다야게 잘라라 소바다 디니게 구마자베나 근데 가시 겨르셔스 기르에스네 냐위게 냐위게 냐호르 냐원을 기르에스야지 어두숭도아
Then the Buddha here mentions the karmic ripening results from stealing from the Sangha community. If it is a requisite means of providing sustenance for the Sangha, one will be born in the great hells. So this is if one steals something that sustains their life and well-being, such as food or clothing, then the karma is particularly intense. And if the text continues, and if something else, so if one steals some other possession from them, one that isn't necessary sustaining their lives, then one will be born in the great darkness surrounding Avicii.
신이 신도 돕체되다 전주선바데 딜레야 아니 전주선바 빼마세 돕체와래 디바 전주선베니 게미게 신도 돕체데스 아니 가서래 전주선발라 최고 표현에 개와 돕체와다 디바 충유체베네 디바데 신도 돕체와 자기레스 전주선발라니 게미게 신도 돕체데스.
So that's part of the quotation that started with however to the end. This was in relation to the sub-outline of the Sangha. Before that was the three jewels. Now we come to the final and the larger part, that of bodhisattvas. And bodhisattvas have such a big section because of the immense virtue or non-virtue one can create in relation to these beings.
나디 가르레스네 전유선바샤디 맨에 semjen tam jegi dondalya chedo chaba semjen taye ba 심진 세매 바지 심지 탐지기 된다 체도죠 심지 탐지기 된다 안에 대양 심지 탐지 동아시에 디네 톱자 탈도 심지 탐지 산지고 다 톱자 탈도 산지를 고방 딜레 하바지 매와와 지자선 톱자 탈도 산지고 고방 심지 탐지를 판도 개침부 제도에 산이마도 매와 지자데 개침부 제도에 톱자 탈도 산지고 고방 돈도 니르고래 제자다 대양은 랑이 된다 마이바 심지 탐지기 된다 심지 가시지기 된다 멤버 심지 탐지기 된다라 어두신에 군롱 데니기 키에제네 안에지 계절 냠는 난구요 바 인자 다 데니기 델이야 전시세베델이야 최발마서는 충중시 중세시 부배네야 다지 개와 배마스 돕침 못 차기래 다 신규권에 당한지 그신 대신에 신규권 돕차지로 와서 데니기 신 전시세바디기 개와 제반의 개와 돕침 뭐 델이야 네바로 충중을 제배네 네바 제 충중마도 배 미로로 있다다 감 베니 윤저로 직충주를 제배네 야고요 말했어야 돼. 전신바지 야고요 말했어야 돼. 네 직라베네. 다 디버 빼마치 침모차기래 제. 그래서는 뭐 전신바지야디 체도제와 심지어 탐지기 된다래야 게저도 되게. 톱자 나 산지고 반 라나미 바 산지고 바 토바제 바 인자 데니기 토네 냠내 나두게 인자 델이야 도시네 개와 충준 제배네 개와 소속이 부여 충준마도 마비네 개와 돕지 못 차야다 디벌 마서나 데니기 칭은 충준지 어데 이 라바 송 라바이네야 디기 디벌 돕지 못 차기를 해서지도 송으로 와다 제사 전주sem발라니 게미게 신도 돕체대 세디오라 전주sem발라니 개와다 미개와 신신도 체대 돕체대세
So, reading from the text, bodhisattvas are an extremely powerful field of virtue and non-virtue. So, why is this so? Well, it is because of the genuine quality in the mind of the bodhisattva, namely their bodhicitta. So, bodhicitta itself has two aspects, and it's these two aspects of bodhicitta that make the bodhisattva such an incredibly powerful field for either virtue or non-virtue. Those two aspects of bodhicitta are firstly, the bodhisattva holds in their heart each and every single sentient being equally, without exception. So this means that they have equal care and concern for every single sentient being throughout all the realms, throughout the entirety of space. Every single being they hold as dear. So there is no greater number of beings that one can be working to benefit, because it encompasses every single being. And the second component of bodhicitta is that the determination to become a Buddha in order to help each and every sentient being, to lead them to a state freed of suffering. So there's no greater goal that any being could be striving for than the goal of Buddhahood. So these two factors, these two qualities that make up bodhicitta, are what make the bodhisattva such an incredibly powerful field. Because ordinary beings care for themselves, but they are also likely to care for a certain group. But that's the extent that they are striving to help. But a bodhisattva holds all beings equally close. And all beings, when we think about it, throughout all the realms is an immense number. And there is no greater number of beings that one can cherish. And likewise, wanting to benefit them all in the greatest of ways, therefore striving to become a Buddha, there is no greater goal to strive for. So therefore, because of these two qualities of bodhicitta, the bodhisattva is an incredibly powerful field for either virtue or non-virtue. So if one criticizes, for example, bodhisattva saying, she's no good, so much non-virtue is created from that because of the qualities in the mind of the being being criticized.
Debi top kebalu jubi chagi dole se dodi on debi top kebalu jubi chagi do se dina la garson dole es 안에 가시 최내 초주 심전 탐제 전러서 문화도 주바외 최대 장수 장심라 잡기 초대 누네 마롱바 디미타오 시 세나 안 딕체 장매바 개바당사.
And as always, Lama Tsongkhapa then provides a quotation to show that he's not just making this up, but there's a valid source, and the source here is the Buddha himself. So from the Seal Enhancing the Power of Faith Sutra, it says that compared to someone who, out of anger, puts all the sentient beings of the 10 directions into a dark prison, if someone else, out of anger, turns his back on a bodhisattva saying, I will not look upon this horrible person again, he generates an incalculably greater bad deed.
나도나 송와디 가르송에 가시 최내에서다 최내 초주 심전 탐제 전제 문화도 주바외스다 답변의 공론하시 초주의 심전 차상 안추 dom제 전강나 봐 전강 로매번 너후나파 주샤번나 다 데니기다 초주의 심전 차상 전강나 주데 다 디바 전부 쉬우지 디바사야 인임으로 와다 심전 빠도 매봐죠 데니기 디바사바 델레 장주선바 델라 안에 최대세 장주선을 빼는 마가와 계신 최진의 최내 yapyu chode dugne sen pa jensen phi jensen ba yoba na jensen ba de la ma ga je khai yaplo de ba na de jam chu ba du sin yaplo de je oda de du sin de na ga la or sne ane be du ja ro kol ka so re chode du ne marun wa mi ma ta was ko be du ja kol mi ma ta sen du sin de ba na di mi ma ta de ni ge sam sam gi ta di ba de che ba re so da 심전 초주 심전 탐제 전가나 루제 아니지 디바 딜에 전심바들 바 최제 마가와제 아니 미마다지 거 마다 거배 두자레세 되네게 지지라 바이나 디바디 쳐바레서.
The comparison has been taken. So reading again from the text, compared to someone who out of anger, so that there's the motivation, motivated by anger, puts all sentient beings in the 10 directions, so all sentient beings, puts them in a place of great fear, a dark prison. So one can imagine what that would be like. You're in complete darkness, it probably doesn't smell very nice, and you have no hope for freedom. And this is where you are confined to, possibly one assumes, for the rest of your life. So this is an incredibly cruel thing to do. It's not merely adding to the burden of suffering, but doing so in an intense way. And doing so for all sentient beings means one would incur an incredible amount of non-virtue. But, and then the comparison continues, if someone else, out of anger, so a similar motivation, turns his back on a bodhisattva saying, I will not look upon this horrible person again. So again, saying something not so polite, but also not that bad, he generates an incalculably greater bad deed. So we see here, despite not really saying anything particularly terrible, I will not look upon this horrible person again, but saying it with anger, because it's a bodhisattva, so an incalculable amount of non-virtue is created.
Yeah, that's the chewa sungro. Chedin gangul lungi chemanye shiba tang seba les janju semla kondro tang nuesim jejing minyemba mena ngardar sungba tang sa.
Continues. Also compared to someone who has destroyed and burned down stupas as numerous as the sand grains of the Ganges River, if someone else generates anger and harmful intent in his mind towards a bodhisattva and says unpleasant things to him, it is as above.
강글룽스는 추마 강가서 제마 세도 디나는 제마 들어와다. 제산 제마니 라도 디장나냐 봐도 제마레레레 디장나냐 비기 다 최딘 망고 장난이 최딘 파 시바 매 메르세바이나 다 디바 봐도 메서야 봐다디 다지 가주마 강가기 월이 젬바디단 장난이 비기 최딘 다다 시우주여 봐도 전문 알마 샤야로 싫어다 데네기 최딘디 파 시제 시바 대서 메라 땅비게 디바네 디바 빼마서 침보 살고로 봐다 디디가 데네기 제바 디바 딜레 안 디바 가르체레서 자유심발로 콘로나지 뇌심 계징 민예바 자유심발 콘로나 델레코 코파 뇌버기에게 삼노지 코르체 군내라제 데네기 칙 민예바 칙죄바나 베는 방과사다 구마사다 데네기 칙 민예바 칙지 셰바나 디디바 채와레서 오다 디바 채와다.
Here, further comparison is created or presented, and it's taking the Ganges River in India, which many of you may have visited, or certainly you'll all know about. And if one imagines how many grains of sand there are in the entire length of the river, the number of grains of sand both encompassing the river bank and the river bed, and if one were to take that number and have stupas existing in this world, and then someone were to destroy all those stupas, an immense amount of non-virtue be clearly created. So here the text says, also compared to someone who has destroyed and burned down stupas as numerous as the sand grains of the Ganges River, if someone else generates anger and harmful intent in his mind towards a bodhisattva and says unpleasant things to him, it is as above. So the comparison is, a person is angry and has harmful intent leading from the anger, and then they were to express some rude words, some insults, maybe calling them a thief or a beggar, they would create even more non-virtue than the destruction of so many stupas.
디바디 두셰베 자디 도쇼레 개와디엔 지바라와데 데니게 최대 장단님비 직제 바샹발레 셴베 선남델레 나 전시센발레 쳐바 총지 푸나 데 쳐베디 개와체라세데 다디 도쇼디 고고로다 개와체 데지 다딩 디바치 전시에로와다 최대 데니게 최대 시발레 전시센발레 뇌심게제 지가소레 직전 디바체 사이라로와 다디 도쇼 개와섬다마나 제산 주마강의 재미 장단님 비유 최대 상발이 장비가 선음 딜레 선음 빠트마 사이로와 상와 디나지 선 최대 현재 선음 사발레 다 딜레 전시센바질이야 대비 군내라지 안데 지 처바 총지 표베네 디 개와지 시리에서지 독소 딜리그로와다.
And the opposite is also true. So it's good to read these accounts such as this with the understanding that the opposite is also true. So if one were to build that many stupas, or one were to make a small offering to a bodhisattva and do so motivated with a mind of faith, one will make far more virtue from offering to the bodhisattva even than commissioning and building an incalculable number of stupas.
다디네게 아치게 돌레스 네바다 망게발레 주비게 차게 돌레스 다디 안도나레 가르송레스네 도디 체인데 네바다 망게발 주비 차게 도세 디나레 가르송레스 돌레 초주 심전기 미충와라 젬비 심기 미글라르 게바당 심전가만남 전제네 된데 아니 콜로규람 창비 대화라 꿰바외 태신라 메베게 장선바라스 당외 다와당 당외 대되징 디응아바죄나 쇠남체 장매바 개월 송바당.
Continuing in the text, from another sutra, Seal of Engaging in Certain and Uncertain Destinies, says that compared to someone who, out of love, restores the eyes of those sentient beings in the 10 directions whose eyes were gouged out, and who, after releasing the aforementioned sentient beings from prison, establishes them in the happiness of a universal monarch or of Brahma, if someone else, out of trust, looks at or out of faith, wishes to look at a bodhisattva endowed with Mahayana aspiration and sings his praises, he generates incalculably greater merit.
choju simjen ge mi chungwa la jembe sengi mi lar ke ba da se da choju simjen tamje mi long de ba mi me de gen na nel ya ni je jamba sam da jamba ke ne jembe sim yu ku ne la jo ko le mi ti pa de mi pa yu mi tong se ba na so mi lar ke ba so mi ti mi long wa de da pa men ju ro je ko ka na je ko mi ti yang ja se ba ina me so ba na da di yang ja tu mi tong yu ba se ba ina da 다디 pen 바도 메가 차이로 와다 군노 젠베 심 젠베 삼바 삼다 데니게 심전 초지 심전 탐제기 미롱아디기 파 미디야 야 쇠지 미디 통화여 봐 쇠바나 데니 개와 바도 메가 사이로 와다 디 개와 침부 휴사이로 와다 디세고로 와다 초지 심전 다지기 미충와라 젠베 심기 미클라 개바나 나 개와 바도 메가 사이고로 해세
In this comparison, the virtuous deed expressed at the beginning, reading and thinking what a wonderful offering it would be, we can recognize how much merit is created by such an act. So motivated by genuine love, one restores the sight of sentient beings in the 10 directions whose eyes were gouged out. So perhaps gouged out a little difficult, but let's say they are blind, and through the application of surgery or some medication, their sight was restored. What a wonderful gift to give with love. So we can imagine just how much merit is created by doing so.
Dene semjengama nam zondrene twende de ji choju semje tamje ane jeba zwenga na hu na pa ju sha ba su dene ge su twen zwenga na su twen ne ya ji zwenga na su twen dene kolo ya ne kolo gyu ramsen kolo gyu be dene ge that bene koloju wasina pe wana chemo denegi koloju gebola soba denegi gobale yoba denegi goba na de ko khorada ne wanchi yoba de yupunsu soba chi o denegi de gya denele pa goba ina gewa patum ba sayada dene yang changbe dewa lo goba se da changba yang zo sanji jaju le lalia le dewa che lalia goye chine le dewa nyongwa china da ko le denegi 다 전가 나라 강가 나라 두 홍대바 파수 된제 데네수 된 안야 될이야 이제 콜로기위기 개볼라서 베게 데네기 대화라야 당 늘히 창바 리요고 본 야고제 리 대화 녀야라서 봐 데네고 바이나 데네 대화디 대화 녀바이나 페 파인 바도메 바서 개와 바도메 바서 이거 봐다
And the illustration continues. And after releasing the aforementioned sentient beings from prisons, just in the quotation above, establishes them in the happiness of a universal monarch. So one can fantasize about how wonderful it would be to take people who are in the most wretched of situations, locked without hope in a dark, gloomy prison, and both releasing them and radically transforming their good fortunes, giving them all the wealth and the power and the prestige of a universal monarch, or establishing them in a situation equal to the great god Brahma. So one could think how wonderful it would be to do that, and if one were to do so, it would be inconceivable how much merit one would create.
데니기 개와 침부 사고 어데 이나 델레 개와 쳐와데 가리어스네 아니 태진라 매베게 전주선바 당외 따와 태진라 매베게 전주선바라나 다 태진 태버침베 강사 전주선바 초람바다 졸람바라서 파파라서 바 개와 빠도메 바 대지 강이야 주사로바 진짜다 태진라 매베게 전주선바라도 태진 초람바다 전주선바 졸람바 파베 강사 많이 나야 전주선바 초람바다 졸람바 되네 있음려야 배지 당외 대발레시 대비가 군에 나제야 믹다와라 제와라 소바다 된 대비 군에 나제 될래 제기 인생비게 되네게 제주게 삼바 계제 두시네 대 안에 되네게 전에 딩아버 쳐봐 될래 저게 뚱아스 배치 돼야 여러바다 되네게 좀 있는 아버 쳐봐 배야 오래 안 고선 두신 염는 나 배야 오래 해야 돼 두시에 된 아버 쳐봐 있나 다 수놈들 대지 되게래 수놈 슉쳐와래 배 장매봐 the Drangmeba Chewa, Drangmeba Gewa Songs, Sunum Chewa, Drangmeba, Sunum Chewa, Dile Chewa, the Dranga Jamna, Dranga Japtu meeting at Gigor Hegere.
Then Lama Tsongkhapa creates the comparison. If someone else, out of trust, looks at, or out of faith, wishes to look at a bodhisattva endowed with Mahayana aspiration, so a bodhisattva endowed with Mahayana aspiration refers to an ordinary bodhisattva, a bodhisattva in the paths of accumulation or preparation, a bodhisattva who is not yet an Arya being. So looking at them with faith, and then, continues, sings his praises. So praising such a bodhisattva, from that act, one will create incalculably more merit than even helping sentient beings in such a profound way as in the first part of the comparison.
Diba Chime, Che Drangmeba Gewer Sungbe, Ne de la Shindu Sapar Chawos.
Final one, also the magic of the complete certainty of total peace sutra says that compared to killing all the sentient beings of Jambudvipa or seizing all their possessions, someone who obstructs even as little as the virtue of a bodhisattva's giving a handful of fruit to an animal generates incalculably greater evil or non-virtue. Therefore, you should be very careful with respect to these objects.
다 점불링게 심지어 담 저서반에다 디바팀 시고 주요로와다 디바 시고 주요들와 지대 내니기 디바 침보샤에 디바 침보요레스 디나신다 도바 탐지 초바 심지어 탐지기 점불링게 심지어 탐지기 유자라 가르여반 추간 저 초바이나 초바네 다 디바 시고 사이로와다 지난 내니 디바 침보사고레스 딜레 디바 가르치기를라네 점불링게 심지어 탐지 수업이 디바 대당 점불링게 심지어 탐지기 잘라 추 차상 코로나를 여바디 추가서 초백이 디바 제바이나 아니 딜레 디바 차와 가려서는 아니 전주선배기 잘라 먹고 촌에다 디바 제레 차와 또나 아니 뒤로래 대기 칼라 베네 산창지기도 내게 빠르마서 도도 지로시 데니기 짐바 전주선배기 뒤로래 대기 짐바디 땅야라 바시 제바이나 니 디바디 대시디 심전 탐지 쇠바다 심전 도고 초베 디바디레 디디바 쳐와레서.
And the final comparison from the Buddha here is compared to killing all sentient beings of Jambudvipa and seizing all their possessions. So we know we shouldn't even harm a single sentient being, let alone killing all of them so as to steal their possessions. Clearly an immensely non-virtuous deed. But in the comparison, that is not as bad or not as non-virtuous as impeding a good deed of a Buddha. Someone who obstructs even as little as the virtue of a bodhisattva's giving a handful of food to an animal generates incalculably greater evil or non-virtue.
심전 탐지기 된다라 상여고방 토비치 탈도시의 진의 자연창 직 진바디에 진바디 진비 부여의 진바디 내 군롱 심전 탐지기 된다 안 탈도 탑자 상여 심전 상여 탐지기 된 상여고방 토비치도 디부기 디 진바 등겨 봐자 디 진바디 나야라 발치베네 디버치 모쇼 사고라 그래서 심전 탐지기 된다기 제들이야 네버치 발치 제반자 아니 디 디버치 모사고라 세티 수로다.
So the reason is, superficially, the bodhisattva is giving a handful of food to a single animal. But what's happening in the motivation of the bodhisattva is vastly different. The bodhisattva is not just helping a single mother sentient being, but this single mother sentient being is like a representative of all suffering beings. So the bodhisattva, in their act of kindness to this one being, is holding dear all sentient beings. Whilst they're expressing kindness to one, in their heart, they are wanting to express it to all. And secondly, whilst what they are giving is just some common food, what they are wanting to give is the guidance to lead beings freed, to gain their own freedom from suffering. So whilst in this instance, it's just food being given, the wish from the Bodhisattva is to be giving the most valuable of gifts, guidance, so that beings can gain their freedom from suffering. So therefore, whilst on the superficial level, one person is being stopped from giving just some food to one other being. But what is going on, what is being impeded is that activity in the mind. And that activity on the mind is incomparable to any other mental activity. Therefore, impeding it is so greatly non-virtuous.
Konjo sumda, anera pamala sobata, Genduna, Janjusembala, Yadu Shin, Puiche Kawatuba, and Kawadu Shukchemboimba. The ne dele never chevena, Diva Shukchemboimba, the Anzu Ducene, that the Hawadi, that is our Chevaracha Ruada. The names are Danganzuki, then Yamlin Chewa, the Karasen, Danganzuki Chevaruji, Chunjuji Medoji Pubinada, in the 연차지 표현에 보여로지 보는 게와 충분히 시비네 지나다 랑기 야 권조숨 딘데로 유에베체 권조숨도 표현에 선비게 매바지 표현하다 초주의 상계나 전주선바 탐제를 표현에 선비 매바지 표현이나 나데네게 디바디 그까서 개와디 랍친시부 차고라도 나인보든 가서 냠린 제바 제베 갑라 당한 저기 권조 숨기 연대된 바다 데네 상계단 전주선비 연대된 소바 안데네게 돈의 최고 표현한다 최고 표현이다 조직계와 사회세나 제바 지도다 조직 상계다 전주선바 탐지를 표현 선비게 매바지 표현 너수주기 델이야 권조숨대요 권조숨의 표현 선비 매바지 표현이나 다딩한 저기 개와치 뭐사야 책으로다 데네게 직접 표현으로서 가래 좀이나 데네 제베 나가서 다디 So
this then concludes the presentation of the first of the four fields, the field of the first of the four strengths. This strength by way of field or recipient. So you see from this presentation just how much virtue or non-virtue can be created in terms of the recipient. And again, so the field here refers to the three jewels, one's Lama or those similar to one's Lamas, and your parents, and so forth. So other practitioners who have not yet attained a path or are approaching a path. So that in general is who the field refers to. So towards them, immense virtue or non-virtue can be accumulated. So hearing this then, I hope you take motivation to practice, making perhaps offerings to, let's say, the three jewels. And you hear from this presentation, it's the field that leads to so much virtue. So it doesn't have to be a big offering. One can offer some flowers, some incense, one can even do so mentally. The way, and what's a key component though to amplify it, and it's a key component within everyone's capacity, is not just to rely on the three jewels, on the field to create a lot of merit. Also, take the time to cultivate an excellent motivation. And to do this, remind yourself of the qualities of the recipient of that field, the qualities of the three jewels or the Lama or one's parents and so forth. Remind yourselves of their many qualities and the kindness or benefits they have brought into your life. In this way, one will develop both a deeper mind of faith as well as an appreciation for them. And that then will serve as a powerful motivation behind the offering that you make. And again, this offering can be done mentally, it can be a common substance, and it can be not an offering. Offering is the illustration given most, but in terms of whatever virtuous activities one does, if one has, if they are done in relation to a field such as this, you can be confident extensive virtue will be accumulated.
니에텔라 신도 사바르 자오 시름치기데 삽삽치고래 손을 제사당은 저기 데네기 상계다 전주센발이야 아니 균주제기 cik라서 받아 데네기 즉 디바침부 연구요 받은 저기 자고 엔자 대자 데네기 삼로마 호야 데들 균주 마셔야기 데네 삽삽치고래스 아니 아직 현대의 경제시가 섬다외 현대시내 소식의 전주도 오다 전주센바로 지기나 디버침버사이데 남 파저되게 전주센바 이명하자 하고 말하다 지산 직진의 잠바 전주센바 인식이 댕이 되네게 호들래 되네게 제네게 네베 삼바로 지다 코리아다 코리아 지네버 충충 제베네 다 전주센바 있는 디버 빼심버사이다 삼제 안는 도시네 네 바신데 네베 체기 사비아 삽섭체와디 근데 도시 계침버려서 송거로 왔다.
Just further in relation to the last sentence, therefore you should be very careful with respect to these objects. This summarizes well that we need to take care of our mind and what we express, what we say and do coming from our mind. In particular, if towards those fields, the three jewels, the lamas, similar to Lama's parents and so forth, but also to bear in mind that in society we do not know who are bodhisattvas. They will appear in many guises to be of benefit to beings in ways that are not necessarily obvious to us. So we need to use that as motivation to take care of our mind, so that we avoid creating non-virtue. And moreover, we can also use this to inspire us to say, as I do not know who a bodhisattva is, let me be careful around all beings, because when I am in the company of those who I assume are likely to be bodhisattvas, I need to be confident that I can then restrain my mind. So if I can restrain my mind in other circumstances, I can be confident that in the circumstances I'm around bodhisattvas, I will restrain my mind and I will act and speak in appropriate manners.
예사당은 저기 현지로 로봇이 제외나다 현 패저 로봇의 유디 전시선바 인다 많이가서 하고 말았지 지나다 도시네 되네게 로봇의 전시선바지 유디 전시선바지 해도에나 나데네게 패인 받으면 봐서 책으로 와 지나 되네서 소식이 대신에 로봇의 그 고가로 제외네 다들 패저디 즉 전시선바 이미 하고 뭐 직진 전시선바 인식을 직진 전시선바 인바는 나도 개와 받으면 봐서야 돼 선배게 되게 전시선바 있는 제비 토네 안에 지시할이야 도시네 나 소식이 되게 로봇 제기 잠단 제베나 나디안데 지고 전시선바 세디 맞아 쓰는 사이에 된다라 아니 남바 나서 담아라 된제네 비교로 가브레네 베네 라마로다 가브레네 교로다 데니게 롱모로자 데니시 리그로 비교로와 제가 데니게 이게 데니게 삼다 생각하게 로봇체베나다 대전시선바 멤버네 수능 침보사야래 전시선바 계속 받나 이다 딜레게 할 수는 빠도면 봐서 작으로 와다 라마다 미교보다 데다 말하신 누구로 다들 나말리로 하다 나서지 용거라 까빌레시에 탑간지에 용식을 제 참탑간 용거래 아님까지 롱 하나 되네 용식다 말하지네 용식 다 상계다 전유신비기 아 저거 선음 사에게 탑lâm 다 말아 용는 거로
Furthermore, when helping others, we also have no idea whether they are bodhisattvas or not, because again, bodhisattvas will appear in many guises to help beings. They don't restrict themselves to appearing as holy beings who are obviously special. So they will appear in many guises. And if we happen to be helping this being who turns out to be a bodhisattva or who in reality has generated bodhicitta, we will accrue immense merit. So therefore, it's only beneficial to bear in mind that this person or animal that I'm interacting with, maybe they are a bodhisattva, and relate to them with care, with respect, with dignity, bearing in mind that bodhisattvas certainly appear in the world as teachers, guiding beings, giving advice and guidance in how to accumulate virtue and abandon non-virtue, but they do not restrict their capacity, their beneficial activities to merely acting as holy people. They may well appear as a beggar on a footpath, so that you can practice generosity towards them, or as animals in need, or as singers or dancers. There is not a limit to or restriction in terms of how bodhisattvas will appear, other than they will appear in ways to benefit. So therefore, keeping this in mind may also well inspire one to help others and to help them in a way that's appropriate, holding them in an appropriate manner. Then thank you. We can conclude there for this evening. Thank you.